Hello, everyone. Welcome to our NHMC Television Writers Program webinar. I think we can go ahead and get started. We have plenty of people on the webinar, so we can go ahead and start on time so everyone can get out at a reasonable time to finish their work days. Okay, thank you everyone for joining us on this webinar to learn more about the National Hispanic Media Coalition's Television Writers Program. We appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedules to be here with us, and we hope this webinar is informative and answers some of your questions in regards to the program in general and the application process for this year. We will be taking questions at the end of the webinar, so please write your comment in the question taskbar and we will try to get to it then. We are also recording this webinar and will provide the link to the recording on our website in a few days' time. Before we get started, I wanted to introduce myself and the panelists that will be participating. My name is Nilda Muhr, and I'm the Director of Programs and Special Events at NHMC. I coordinate the Writers Program and will be the moderator for the webinar. We have Alex Nogales, President and CEO of NHMC, with us here today to explain a little bit about NHMC's mission, as well as the history and purpose of the program. Geoff Harris, the mentor for the program, has joined us as well to give a little insight on what goes on during the 5 weeks of the program, as well as Silvia Olivas, a writer who participated in the 2009 program, who will be sharing some of her experience in the program as well. So Alex is going to go ahead and give you all a little bit of a background on NHMC's work and mission. Go ahead, Alex.
Thank you very much, Nilda. And thank you, folks, for joining us. The National Hispanic Media Coalition is a 27-year-old nonprofit organization. We started here in Los Angeles as a consequence of Latinos not being anchors on the local stations, and that was 27 years ago. We did what are called petitions to deny licenses if, in fact, Latinos were not put into those positions. And the second reason why we started the coalition was because everything that came over the air, here again on the local stations, were very negative. It was a crime blotter for all intents and purposes, telling us that Jose killed Maria, Maria was a smuggler. It just went on and on and on. So it was very disturbing to the Latino community. At that time, we were 42% of the population of the area. Now we're much more. We're 48%. And so we decided at that time, 27 years ago, that we had to do something. And we formed a coalition, and the coalition has been involved in many of the fights against the restrictions of having Latinos both in front and in back of camera. I have to tell you now that we started the Writers Program because of the fact that we felt that unless we had writers participating within the system, we were never going to get the opportunity to tell our stories, to even come out with our own stories. So it was very important to us that we start a program. So we fashioned one. We went to ABC and to NBC, asked them for their support, and they've been supporting it now for 10 years. It's become a very successful program. A quarter of all our writers, 1/4 out of 100, in other words, 25 are working writers. They're on different shows, and it's been really gratifying to see that, in fact, we have turned out very successful people. We knew it was going to happen. We just needed the opportunity. So I'm glad that many of you are here learning more about what this program is so that you can apply. Now, one of the things that we knew was going to happen was that after certain writers, the more assertive ones, the more creative ones, we knew that if they stayed in the industry for some years, they themselves would become creators. And that is what is beginning to happen. Some of those writers have been working for 10 years, some for 7 years, 5 years. They've gone from the first step of being a writer to the next step, to the next step, and to the next step, and they're ready to pitch their own shows. So we have started another program as a consequence of that, and that is to get these top writers together and kind of make him even smoother in terms of pitching to the networks. And we have arranged for the networks to hear their pitches so that, in fact, if this pitch doesn't work, perhaps this other one will, and perhaps this other one will. So it's step one and step two. One was just to get the writers inside the system, and then secondly was to get them to learn how to pitch really well so that they can start having their own programs that will, of course, by osmosis, reflect Latino values, Latino stories, and be something that we can look in the air and say, yes, finally, we're getting our own stories. So that is the reason for the program. That is why we have such a diverse group of people working on it. And I think, who is next? Let me see, 10 years in the making. It's been 10 years, and we're very proud of the fact that we've launched a great many people at Disney, ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, Nickelodeon, CW, BET, LA TV, and Nuvo TV. So it's been a very attractive program. And Nilda, I take it back to you.
Thank you, Alex. And I just wanted to go ahead and point out that last season alone, we had writers on shows like Grimm, The New Normal, Happy Endings, NCIS, and The Fosters, amongst others. And looking forward to the 2013 and 2014 television season, we already have writers placed on shows like Ravenswood, Gang Related, Surviving Jack, and The Crazy Ones. We'll hopefully find out more coming closer to the fall season. Also, it is important to note that many of our writers, due to their participation in our program, get accepted into other highly competitive writing fellowships that are hosted by the networks. 4 of the most important include the Disney ABC Writing Program, NBC's Writers on the Verge, and the Fox Writers Intensive, as well as CBS's Writers Mentoring Program. So with that said, I'll go back to you, Alex, to explain how the program works.
All right, you have to apply, very obviously. And if you go to the application process, you will see what the requirements and so forth. A total of 10 writers are picked from the 200 plus entries that we get. And we bring them into Los Angeles for a 5-week total immersion program that takes place here in Burbank each year. A stipend of $250 per week is given to each participant because we know very, very well that it's difficult to do a program like this and not have any money coming in. So it's not going to make you rich, but at least it buys your candies, your soap, and whatever else you need to be able to exist while you're here. Now, I've got to tell you a story now about the person that runs this program for us. It is Geoff Harris. When I first conceived this program with NBC, I wanted a Latino to be the one that ran this program. And the fellow that I was dealing with said, I want you to come in and meet this fellow, Geoff Harris. Geoff is a former VP of Writers, Vice President of Writers at NBC. You're going to like him. And I was prepared not to like him. So I walk into the room, and I see Geoff Harris. There you have a picture of him, sitting down. And, I went up to say hello to him, to shake his hand, and he started to get up, and he got up, and he got up, and, this guy is like 6'5" or something like this. And I was kind of looking up. I'm 6'1", but I was kind of looking up at him. Within 5 minutes of having met him, I knew that he was the perfect person for this particular job. He is very patient. He is very knowledgeable. He is very tolerant, and yet he infuses this incredible amount of personality, of quietness, of expertise to the writers that he handles. He has done an incredible job for us, and I would never think of having anyone else. He has run this program for 10 years, and he is also running the second program, which I described earlier today, and that was the one about Latino writers getting very polished in terms of pitching their own story. So with that, I pass it over to Geoff Harris.
Hello, everyone. I'm Geoff, and I just want to give you a sense of what the program will be. It's set up like a writer's room, and I would be the showrunner in this writer's room, and we begin by pitching ideas to each other and deciding which ideas would be the strongest on that particular spec script that you're working on, that you want to work on. The main thing about having it set up like a writer's room is that we want to be able to, at the end of it, if you get onto a show, make sure that you play well in the sandbox. That in the writer's room you have to learn how to get along with others. So becoming a TV writer is not just being able to write a good script. If you're not someone who can get along with others and are social in some way, you're probably a screenwriter, for feature films and not for TV. TV is very collaborative, and so that's why we've set it up in a writer's room as if it were a writer's room. We do hour-long spec scripts of shows that are currently on the networks, or half-hour comedies that are currently on the networks. They're all scripts are to be written in English, we'll be meeting for 5 weeks, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. So it's really total immersion, and I find it to be really exhilarating and fun. I know Silvia can talk to you about that, whether it is or not. But I really enjoy it. And every week we have guest speakers that come in and tell you about their journey to becoming TV writers or showrunners or even aides. And we also have network executives from Disney, ABC, and NBC Universal come and speak to the group. In fact, we always start off the program with a breakfast at one of either at ABC or at NBC, and we get to meet the executives there. So it's I think a wonderful experience, and one that's sort of once in a lifetime thing. But that's pretty much it. I should mention that the writer's room is actually set up in my living room, so it's very relaxed, but at the same time we are working together as if we were on a show and working as hard as we can. So that's a little glimpse on how it works.
Thank you, Geoff.
Sure.
So now we'll go on to hear a little bit from Silvia Olivas. Silvia participated in the 2009 Television Writers Program and has been and continues to be a standout alumna of the program. She started out on Moesha, where she rose to become co-producer. She went on to be the co-executive producer on The Brothers Garcia and has not only sold a pilot to ABC Family titled Becoming Latina in 10 Easy Steps, but is also producing a pilot she wrote for Disney Junior. Silvia, we would love to hear some of your experiences during the program, as well as how the program affected your career and what you have done since. So if you could share some information with us, that would be great.
Sure. I worked I worked on about 4 or 5 shows before I took a break, and got married and had my son. And then I was out of the writer's room for about 3 years. And I knew I had to get back in, but all of my material was old. And I needed to have the up-to-date spec scripts. When I heard about the National Hispanic Media Coalition Writers Workshop, I was so excited. I submitted one of my specs, and I got in, and I met Geoff. And Geoff has been amazing. He does, having been someone who's actually worked in writers' rooms before, he actually sets up his living room like a writer's room and really runs it like a writer's room. So once you actually go on a show after being with Geoff, you it's not going to feel new or different. You're going to understand because you would have already gone through it with Geoff. In the 5 weeks that I was in the program, I wrote 2 specs, 1 comedy and 1 drama. And I never thought of myself as a drama writer, but during those 5 weeks, Geoff really encouraged me to write a drama, and I'm so happy I did. And I've written several drama specs since then. But what the program did was it reintroduced me to NBC and Disney and ABC executives, and I had known them before I took my break, and then after meeting them again, I reintroduced myself. So in the program, I was able to reintroduce myself. I was able to expand my contacts, build on my contacts. After the program, I was accepted into the Disney writing program because of the connections I made when I was in the National Hispanic Media Coalition. And being in that program, I was able to meet more executives and build on that. And then the next year, I sold a pilot to ABC Family because they had known me through the Disney program. And then after that, this year, I am writing a pilot I'm actually producing a pilot I wrote for Disney Junior, which is about a Latina. So I'm very excited. All of this started because I decided to do the National Hispanic Media Coalition workshop. And I encourage everyone, anybody who's out there who's on the fence, whether they should take 5 weeks off and do this, I encourage you, do it. It's going to change your life. Not only did I meet more executives and build on my contacts, the writers that were in that room with me are still my friends today. Every time I write a script, there are several of them that I send that script to, and they give me notes. And they know me, they know my writing, I know them, I do the same for them. And that is something that is invaluable. So I definitely say, if you're on the fence, you have to do this program. And that's about it.
Thank you, Silvia. So I just want to go ahead and take the time right now to remind everyone that if you have any questions, you'll have to go ahead and type them in the question bar, and we will actually choose the questions from there. You won't be able to actually ask your question out loud, so please, if you have any during the webinar, just go ahead and type them in the question bar, and we'll read them off at the end once we open for Q&A. Okay, so moving on how to apply for the program. As you know, you can find all of this information online by visiting our webpage, nhmc.org/writers program. But just to give you a little information in case you haven't had the time to check that out, you'll first need to compile the following forms and documents. We have the signed ABC and NBC release forms that need to be signed, and they can be downloaded at our website, nhmc.org/writers program. You will need to prepare a writing sample, just one, of any type, but spec scripts are preferred. A resume or bio needs to be submitted, not both, and a statement of interest explaining why you want to write for television. Once you have those documents ready, you can go ahead and retrieve the link to the digital application on the webpage and complete the application by filling out all of the information requested and uploading the necessary documents. You will not be able to submit an incomplete application, so please make sure you have all of your documents ready. Once you have successfully completed and submitted the application, you will receive a confirmation email. If you don't receive a confirmation email, then it means something must have happened, and you can always email me. You'll have my contact information at the end of the webinar in case you have any questions regarding that. Important dates to remember: the application period closes on August 2nd, no exceptions, so please make sure you apply before 12 o'clock on August 2nd. And those that have been accepted into the program will be notified in the beginning of September, and those that are not accepted will receive an email notification around the same time. Also, please note that due to insufficient resources and staff, we are not able to provide any feedback on your writing samples or your applications. So we apologize for this because we know a lot of you feel that you can only get better by getting feedback, but we get hundreds of scripts, and we just don't have the capacity to really give any feedback. So now with all of that said, we will be moving into the Q&A portion. So if you haven't done so already, please submit your questions by typing them in the question box. Like I said, we have about 12 o'clock, so we have time for plenty of questions in case you have any. And if we don't get to your question today, you can go ahead and visit our webpage and click on the Frequently Asked Questions link to see if it's answered there. And if not, you can always email me your question. As you can see, my email is up on the PowerPoint. Okay, Alex, so I would say this question is for you. We have an attendee that's asking if age is a factor in getting into the writers program. Is there priority given to younger writers? So I guess with the past writers that we've let in, what would you have to say for that?
Yeah, there's no priority, guys. Here we just want good writers. We want writers that want to work, writers that want to write for television. So you can be whatever age, and you can be from any ethnicity within the Latino community. It doesn't matter to us. We want good writers. And, you know, Hollywood is here in the Los Angeles area. It's not in New York, Louisiana, or Detroit. So understand that if you want to be a writer, you have to come here. This is where the action is going on. So no prejudices or biases of any sort. As long as you're a good writer, you apply with all the necessary documents, you'll get in if, in fact, it is judged that, in fact, you're one of the 10 people we want in this program this time around. And sometimes, you know, you have to apply a second time because reading scripts to some degree is going to be subjective. And if we don't get you the first time, we'll get you the second. Back to you, Nilda.
Thank you. Our next question will be for Geoff, since you have a lot of experience reading the scripts ahead of time. What criteria are scripts judged on? So I guess if you could answer that generally, Geoff.
What criteria? Generally, for the idea and for the execution of that idea. You know, I mean, that's usually if it's a spec script, if you're able to replicate the show that you're writing, if it's a you know, short story, what's the idea, you know, and how is the writing? How do you execute that idea? And for novels, the same thing. So that generally that's how I do it. You know, because I read the scripts as well as those we have some executives from ABC and also NBC reading them, and then we all get together and figure out our top 10. So, you know, personally, that's how I look at the scripts. You know, is it a good idea? Does it replicate the show? That's it.
Thank you. Okay, so a good question we have is that we do state multiple times that the program isn't for beginners. So does this mean that one needs to have past TV writing experience in order to apply, or can someone who can write scripts apply only? I guess, Alex, that would be a good question for you. Basically, do you need to have past TV writing experience?
You know, what you have to be is very, very good. It's not for beginners in the sense that if you just, you know, got out of school and you've never written a script, more than likely you won't be very good at even format. And, you know, there's dramatic things that you have to involve, and Geoff is the best judge of those kinds of things. So it's not necessarily for beginners, but there are some beginners that are so good that you'd be foolish to turn them away. So we have had folks like that. But on the whole, it is for those writers that have gained a little bit of experience, some experience, and they're ready for the next step. The next step is going into the professional ranks of television writing here in Hollywood for the studios, for ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, and all those other studios that are turning out materials. So I hope that that answers the question. Geoff, do you want to add to that? Am I saying
No.
enough on the subject?
Yeah, no, I think you covered it all, really. You know, I don't think I have anything to add. I mean, you did a good job.
Okay.
So we have a few similar questions in regards to whether the specs have to be written based on a current show, and I think we should probably clarify that for the application process, whatever you do submit, whatever kind of writing sample, it doesn't have to be a spec script, but like we say, it is preferred. I don't think it does have to be on a current show, correct, Geoff?
That's correct, yes.
And then I guess we can clarify that once they are accepted into the program, the spec script that they are writing for, I know you have criteria for that. It doesn't have to be a current show.
Yeah, that would be a show that's currently on. So once they get into the program, they will be writing a script, a spec script of a show that's currently on television.
Okay, so just to make that clear, if you are choosing to write a spec script as your writing sample, it doesn't have to be on a current show.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, you could do, you know, the Cosby Show if you wanted, as long as it shows to me that your, you know, your abilities as a writer, and that's what the spec script does, is it showcases your talents.
And Geoff, we've had in the past people that have submitted film scripts. Is that correct?
Yes,
and,
we have.
There again, what you were looking for was the dramatic principles of screenwriting, so that in fact we understood that this person knew what they were doing and had something good or interesting to say, correct?
That's absolutely correct, yes.
Back to you, Nilda.
Great, okay. So we've also had multiple questions on whether writing about Latino themes is preferred, or using Latino characters if we're looking for that specifically in the specs. And I think you could probably answer that, Alex.
Well, it does not have to be a Latino theme by any stretch of the imagination. You know, you don't have that many Latino theme programs on television. So we're never going to say to you it's got to be a Latino theme. And, you know, when Geoff looks at scripts, that's the last thing he's going to be looking at. He just wants good writers. And good writers come in all colors and shapes and sizes and, you know, ethnicities. So, no, that has nothing to do with anything. Nilda?
Okay. I guess we can go with whether, at least why writing teams are not allowed to apply for our program. Would you have that answer, Alex?
Yeah, of course. No, we don't accept writing teams, guys, because then you're eating up 2 spots for one team. And that's really not fair to the rest of the writers. We want to see what the individual writer has to show, has to showcase. So teams are not eligible.
Okay, and another common question that we get asked a lot is whether those that are applying need to be Latino or Latina to get into the program. And the answer for that generally is no, but would you like to elaborate, Alex?
No, we cannot discriminate, guys. We cannot discriminate by any stretch of the imagination. So this is open to every person out there, every writer out there. So we have had many instances where writers were half white or half black or half Asian Pacific American. I mean, this is not a stumbling block. So don't let those kinds of considerations even go through your mind. If you're a writer and if you're on this call and this is what you want to do in the future, by all means apply.
Thank you. Another frequent question that we are getting is if whether or not whatever career background, if it's not in writing, if that diminishes the applicant's chances of getting accepted. And I think you can probably speak to that, Geoff, since you've seen writers from all walks of life.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think that the more you've experienced in life, the more stories you can draw from, and that only helps your writing. So you don't have to have been a writing major in college, or a TV or film major in college. And I actually prefer those who have experienced life, because they're bringing stories that are have more drama to them. So I don't think you should worry about that.
This is Alex again. We have had instances where people have submitted a manuscript for a book that they've been working on, theatrical works as well for a play. So we get all kinds of submissions, and it doesn't matter. We would, of course, prefer that they be television, because this is what this is about. But if you have talent in these other areas that can transfer them to screenwriting for television, absolutely, you should apply.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Oh, great. Now I have another quick question that I can answer. The question is whether original scripts, not specs, are considered for the application, and the answer to that is yes. You can definitely submit an original.
Yeah, I mean, pilots or screenplays, anything along those lines would be perfectly fine to submit.
Great. And then let's go with another important question is whether if someone is submitting an original pilot, if they are signing away their rights to it. Did you want to go ahead and answer that, Alex?
No, you're not signing out to anything. We have no motivation to take your works and claim it. So no, absolutely not. What you should do, however, is register it. And there's, the formal way of doing it, of course, through the Library of Congress or through the Screen Actors Guild. But there's another way, and one that is acceptable. And that is to actually put the piece of work in an envelope, address it to yourself, and send it out. And then when it comes to you, you just don't open it. And if there's a date on that is given by the post office, and you all know that, and that makes it your piece of work, dating from that period forward. Is that correct, Geoff? Is there another way of registering?
Yeah, that is an alternate way of registering. But yeah, it's the Writers Guild that you could register, and you can just go online. That's another way. Just go online and to the Writers Guild, West or East. Just Google it, and you'll see that they have a process where you could register your work.
Okay, great. And back to another question regarding the writing samples. There have been a few people that have asked whether there are limitations on the length of the scripts. I would say no, we've never rejected one that was extra long, so go ahead and submit however long you would like your script to be. There's no limitations.
Yeah, I mean, but that said, a feature script should not be longer than 120 pages. Just you won't get anyone to read them, in the industry. And if it's a spec script, you want to stay within, 60 pages for an hour-long drama, and for a single camera comedy, 30 pages, give or take a couple pages.
Now, having said that, folks, there's also something else. You shouldn't send us 2 or 3 pages and expect that that's going to be a good sample of what you can do. And we've had that happen in the past where someone wanted to get into the program and they wrote a treatment of 2 or 3 or 4 pages, and simply is not enough to judge whether, in fact, You can write something that is 30 pages or 60 pages or whatever. So do yourself a service and don't send something like that in, because it's not going to really get you anywhere.
Okay. Another question that's been asked is whether NHMC will put the writers that are going through the program in touch with agents or the Writers Guild of America.
Well, with the Writers Guild of America, it's easy because we have very good relationships with the people that run the programs over there. We have now begun the process of opening the doors of the agencies, because as you all know, it's very difficult to get an agent and less difficult to get a manager, but where you really want to be able to score is with an agent, because when in fact one of the studios, ABC, NBC, CBS, or Fox are looking for writers and they want just the right writer, they're going to go to the agent that they work with and say, hey, who do you have? And if they don't have anybody, and from a long time ago, the agencies just have not been very good about having people of color, regardless of whether they're Latino or Asian Pacific American or Native American, on the roles. And so we're beginning to have dialogues with them so that they open up. As many of you know, the majority of the agents are white males. Not even females are represented. I attended a meeting, there was like 30 agents in the room, and they were all white males with the exception of one female, also white. So you don't have people of color as agents, or very few, and it's lamentable because they need to integrate their own forces, otherwise they're all going to be sending the same people over to the studios. So do we encourage it? Absolutely. Do we work with the agents to open up their doors? Absolutely. Do we bring in speakers that can help in that regard from the executive ranks of ABC, NBC, CBS? Yes. You need to have like every possible way of getting into the business, and we try and offer precisely that. One of the other things that we do is, you know, as Silvia said earlier, you bond with the people in the program, and you bond because you're working very hard, because you're seeing the worth of other people's work, and as a consequence, you just tend to bond. So every 6 weeks or so, we get all the writers together, we invite them in, we have a speaker, normally one that is very into their work and that has become very successful. And they talk about the things that writers talk about. How'd you get in? Where are the opportunities? You know, all of those kinds of things that are very valuable to a writer. Geoff said earlier, and I want to make it very clear, this is not just about having the talent, the chops to be able to write. It's also about being able to get along with other people in a writer's room. Other than that, you know, you're not going to go very far. You've got to be able to network. You've got to be able to work with other people without confrontations about every word that you've written. And you have to have a thick skin because people are going to criticize your work. And Geoff goes through this all of the time. If the criticism is valid and is done in such a way that, in fact, is palpable to the person whose work you're reading, you know, it works. But if, in fact, you're going to be confrontational, it doesn't work. Can't afford to be defensive. And Silvia, why don't you talk about those experiences that you've had along those lines?
Well, first of all, as far as the agent situation, when I was in the program, in the NHMC, there was a writer who I thought was a standout and is still a friend of mine. And at the time, I just had a manager. But I recommended him to my manager, and she read his material, and she signed him. And now I have an agent, but I have that agent because there was another writer who said, you know, you should really read Silvia. They read me and they signed me. So I would say when you get in the program, as far as agents, really try to network with the executives who come through, but also the other writers who are in the program as well. There may be some who have managers and agents and are watching how you act in a room. I have been in a room, many rooms before, and there were certain writers in the program initially who just were very defensive about their writing. And of course, it's so personal and it's yours, and it's kind of hard when someone has a critique on your work. But if you can show that you are open to notes and you also give good notes, Geoff is watching as well. Other writers are watching. The network executives come through and they watch how you interact. So I would always say be professional, be nice, really give the best note, not just a note because you think you have to give a note or you feel you have to speak, but because you're truly trying to help that writer get the best script possible, and you don't know who's listening, you don't know who's watching, and people may very well be talking about you and saying, you know, there's this writer who's so great in that room, you should represent them, or you should read them, or you need to meet them, and that's exactly how it works. It worked that way when I was in that program, and it will certainly work that way when you're in the program. So I really think just being a team player, giving the best notes, not feeling like you always have to talk just to talk, and just being nice. I know it's an easy thing to say, but just be a nice person and always come in and give 100%, because this is just like a writer's room where you're going to have to go in and always give 100% in every show that you're going to go on. So this is a perfect way to get prepared for a writer's room and to learn the rules of the writer's room, because there are rules, and just have fun. You're going to meet so many people who will be your friends years after.
Thanks, Sylvia. And we're going to go ahead and stay on you for this next question that someone has for you. What did you learn in the program about TV writing that you maybe didn't know before the program?
It's funny because when I started writing, all I had to do was write a script, give it to my agent, and sit back and get hired somewhere, hopefully. But now these writers who were in that program, they were all pretty young, and they were all very energetic, and they were all on the web, and they were telling me, Sylvia, you need to have web series ideas. You need to get on the web. You need to get on Facebook. You need to get on Twitter. And they actually helped me get into all this social media. And their enthusiasm just got me excited. Even though I had done it before, they had really made me excited about writing everything, not just comedy, but dramas and web series ideas, and just being open to all the new media out there. So I would say what it did was it really upped my game, being around other creative, excited writers.
Great, thank you. So I think it's a good time right now to point out, many of you have asked who judges the scripts or who gets to read them, and Geoff stated this briefly earlier in one of his answers, but in case everyone didn't understand or get it, he is one of the main judges and readers, but we also have from the sponsoring networks, NBC and ABC executives that read the scripts, as well as Alex Nogales, obviously our president and CEO. So with that said, Geoff, someone is asking specifically if they applied to the program in a previous year and didn't get in, should they still be using the same script to apply again, or do you suggest that they submit a new script?
I would suggest that they submit a new script. More than likely, if they haven't made changes to this first script that they submitted, then if it didn't make it through the first time, it probably wouldn't make it through the second. You know, I mean, that's the thing about writing, is that you want to keep writing. You as a writer want to keep writing and writing, because the more you do it, the stronger your writing gets. So if you have another script that you've written, you know, I would suggest to enter with that. And if you haven't continued to write, then you're going to have to fall back on the script that you first applied. And you know, again, probably the chances are going to be relatively slim that you would get in based on the one if it didn't get in the first time.
Okay, thank you. And this is also for you, Geoff. It's specifically about those that are accepted into the program. do the participants work on individual Spec episodes, or do writers work collectively on one Spec episode?
Do you mean once they're in the program?
Yes, once they're in the program.
Okay. Once they're in the program, each writer will choose a particular show that they want to write. You know, first we have to go through the process of just deciding, are you a drama writer or a comedy writer? And once that's decided, then we decide, you decide as the writer, what show you'd really want to write. And then you would come to the class and pitch your ideas for that particular show. We would all discuss those pitches and you know, help you decide which idea to go with. And then you would write that idea into an episode of the show that you've chosen. And at the end of the program, the last 2 weeks are dedicated to table reads of your second draft. Your first draft of that script I'll give you notes on, and then the second draft gets read by the group, and it's actually quite fun. Silvia, you can talk about this. You know, where you have to, where the class then becomes actors and each of us takes on a role, or you know, sometimes more than one role, and does during the table read. And at the table read, it's really, I think, very beneficial because you can hear where things work and where they don't work. And then after the table read, we have a critique. You know, the whole class critiques the work. So I think that's very beneficial. Silvia, did you enjoy being part of the table read?
Yeah, being part of the table read is a lot of fun because Geoff is really, he gives you notes, and some he's very strong on, some he just are just suggestions. But I remember he had told me to punch up the joke, but I just believed in it so much. So we went to the table read with the way I wrote it, and it just died. And I was like, Geoff, you were right. That needed to be punched up. And sometimes you have to just hear it. And, you know, as a writer, you just want to hear your joke. If it doesn't work, then of course you have to punch it up. But doing the table read is a great way to know, because people are immediately going to laugh or they're immediately going to groan at a bad or good joke. So that was a lot of fun, and it was also fun to start using your acting chops and go through everybody's scripts. It was a lot of fun. You guys are going to love it.
Okay, Geoff, we also have another specific question. I guess you had stated earlier that participants will learn how to take notes, and I guess the question is, do you also teach people on how to give effective notes? Would you say that that's covered during the program?
Yeah, that is covered during the program. I mean, to be a working writer in Hollywood, you have to be able to give and receive notes. And there is you really have to learn how to receive them, because I think Silvia mentioned before, being defensive, you know, that's your normal reaction when someone starts to criticize your work. Your normal reaction is to, you know, your back's against the wall and you become defensive, and I meant it this way. You know, what you have to do is learn to, you know, to receive the notes, and sometimes that means, you know, if you're in a writer's room, and Silvia can attest to this, you know, working on a show that's on the network, there are times when the network will come in, the executives from the network, and give you notes, and you have to figure out how to even though the notes may not be great, you have to figure out a way to implement them in such a way that it doesn't ruin what you've already written, but it addresses what the problem was. And you know, so we learn how to do that in the program. We also learn how to give notes. I mean, because you're going to be learning, you're going to be dealing with stories, not just yours, but the others in the class, and you'll know what works and what doesn't work. So that's really how you learn to give the notes. I hope that helps answer the question.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
So we also have someone asking if they are accepted into the program, and once the program is over, what are the next steps for them as writers. And I think it's easy for us to say that we don't know what will happen, but I think it would be a good idea, Geoff, for you to give them kind of a general of what our writers usually do after the program. I think now that they have a completed script, spec script in their hand, what do most of them do after?
Yeah, well, it depends on each person, but they will have their completed script, and they can then use that to get a manager or an agent. And I can help out in any way that I can in that process. Funny story the other day, there was one of our alumni. He came up to me and said that he had a friend who's Latino, and he was trying to get a manager. And the manager said, well, have you been through the NHMC writing program? And the writer said, no, I haven't. And he said, well, then I can't read your work. So he wasn't going to accept this Latino writer. He wouldn't even read his work unless he had gone through the NHMC program. So that's the kind of reputation that we now have, that a lot of the managers will only look at work that has been written by those who have gone through our program. So.
Great. And then we have another interesting question regarding the shows that the participants can pick to write on. Are they supposed to be traditional network friendly, or can they choose to venture a show that's on HBO, Showtime, or AMC? What would you say to that, Geoff?
Yeah, I mean, it's better to go network friendly, but you can write any of the premium cable shows. The problem is that, like, if you're doing a drama, you don't want to write a serialized show, and by serialized meaning that it's not an episodic show. It doesn't have there's not a beginning, a middle, and end in an hour. It just keeps going. I'll give you an example of one. Serialized show on ABC was Lost. So we had one writer who wrote, against my wishes, wrote a Lost, an episode of Lost, a Spec episode, and one thing I said was, you probably don't want to do this, because if they decide to turn left and you've already turned right, then your script is really no good. And if you decide to write, to go right, and they go right, everyone will say, well, he's just written what they've already done. So anyway, this writer wrote his episode, and sure enough, like 2 weeks later, his went right and the story went left. So he was kind of lost in his Lost episode. That helped?
Great. Okay. And with that said, Geoff, when would you say does a spec become old?
I think that you have a year after a show goes off the air, but or one season after it goes off the air, and then it becomes old. And also, there's some shows that just have been on for 8, 9, 10 seasons, and people in Hollywood get tired of reading them. Like a 2.5 Men would be a good example of that. They sort of covered everything already, and another Spec episode of 2.5 Men, even with Charlie out of the picture, is not all that exciting to an agent to read or an executive to read. Yeah, it's a fine line, because you have to pick a series that's been on at least a year, and just so that you can see what the show is, because a lot of times during its maiden season, a show will suddenly switch gears and go another way. So you want to pick a show that's been on for at least a year. ABC says that it should be at least 2 years, but I think 1 year is enough. And then then you can do the best job you can on it. Does that help?
Yes, and then many of you have asked how many applications we generally receive, and we've been getting more and more every year. So right now we're at about 200 applications that we receive for our writers program.
Yeah.
For those that are wondering. And then we have about 2 minutes left for questions, so I'll probably take one or two. Here's an important one for those that are choosing to send in a spec for the application as the writing sample. How important is it, Geoff, that they follow the proper television script format?
I think it's very important. You know, they should, if they're doing a TV series, they should do the proper formatting. And you can find that out pretty easily. I mean, you can just go online and just Google TV formatting, or even just find a script of the show that they want to write. You know, so if they wanted to write a 2.5 men, they could actually find a script online. I mean, it's amazing what the internet can do. So that, yes, I think that it's important that they follow the formatting.
Okay, and then really quickly, I'll try to jumble a couple of questions that seem to be similar into one as the last question. But a few of you are asking what qualities or qualifications we're looking for in our writers on their resumes, or what does a standout script have to look like. So I guess in general, Geoff, do you think you could answer that, what we're looking for overall?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I never go in when I'm reading. I go in with a blank slate. I just say, okay, you know, show me script, what this writer is like. So there's not anything that I say, oh, he's got to do this or she's got to do that. It just, whatever sort of washes over me as I'm reading it. It would be nice, going back to what I just said about the formatting, if you do a spec script, if it's formatted correctly. But if you can't, you know, that's still fine, because I'll be able to read it and you know, judge pretty quickly whether you have the chops. You know, and remember that we're taking, you know, only 10 writers out of 200 plus who are applying, so it's very competitive.
Great. Okay. Well, I think we're out of time for questions. So I apologize if we weren't able to get to your question, but you are more than welcome to email me at muhr@nhmc.org. You have the email right there, and also you can find it online at our website, nhmc.org/writersprogram. Thank you for joining us, and if you have any more questions or if you would like to learn more about NHMC, you can visit us at nhmc.org and go ahead and sign up for our newsletter, or check us out on Twitter at NHMC or at our Facebook page. Thank you again, everyone, for taking the time to join us today for this webinar. Also, the recorded link, the link for the recording of this webinar will be on our webpage in a few days. So if anyone didn't catch the beginning part or the end, or have any friends that would like to hear and listen to it, they can go ahead and access it on our webpage in a few days' time. Thank you.